Hi folks, this is Karim Rao from IT Visualizer channel. They will continue our lab, the Red Alert Lab. This is the video number 42. We have been discussing in the previous video the following. We have been continue working on securing Windows Server 2019 based on the recommendation of the Department of Defense and the Defense Information System Agency of the United States. We have been working now for 11 videos on securing Windows Server. This is the video number 12. We have discussed a lot of concepts to secure Windows Server 2019. Some of them some of these concepts concerning applying certain group policies to secure your Windows Server environment. Some of these recommendations to close or disable unnecessary services or unsecure services on your Windows Server, and other recommendations to secure your users or on your Windows Server, especially the local users on your Windows Server, and a lot of concepts actually. So we will continue working on securing Windows Server 2019. This is the video number 12. We have stopped the last time at this recommendation, which was Windows Server 2019 Active Directory admin SD holder object must be configured with proper audit setting. Okay, this is a folder in the Active Directory. It is very important. It holds the template or the permissions for very important groups in your Active Directory. These groups are called protected groups. Okay, so we can see a little bit of description of what is the admin holder. It is a container that exists in Active Directory for special purpose. The access control list of the admin SD holder object is used as a template to copy permissions to all protected groups in Active Directory and their members. So this is the permissions template used to copy it to the different groups. So for example, this folder contains the permissions for important groups in the Active Directory, like domain admins, administrators, enterprise admins, and scheme admins. So all of the permissions for these groups are stored as a template in the admin SD holder object. Okay, and there is a process done by the Active Directory every now and then. The members in these groups, their permissions are compared to the template permissions in the admin SD holder container. So if there is any differences between the permissions given to the users in these groups and the template permissions in the admin SD holder, if there is any differences, it will be reset, okay, to the default permissions. So this is a very important container, the Active Directory. We need to know who has access to this folder or container, because simply the hacker can go and change the default permissions or the template permissions for the protected groups in the Active Directory. For example, he can go and, for example, remove some permissions from the domain admins permissions and apply this to the template permissions for the domain admins, and then the domain admin can, for example, have less permissions. So here let's see, for example, he's saying that, for example, an attacker can manipulate the ACL or the permissions for the admin holder folder, then these permissions will automatically be applied to the protected groups. So he can play with the template permissions in the admin SD holder folder. He can remove permissions, change permissions, and these permissions will be applied automatically to the domain admins, administrators, enterprise admins, and scheme admins. So this is very, very critical container we need to protect. We need to audit who can access this folder and what changes he made to this container or this folder. So this is very, very critical thing we need to monitor. Okay, and we need to see this in the Active Directory. So let's see here, for example, this is, we need to see the audit permissions. Okay, we need to see the audit permissions on the admin SD holder object in the Active Directory. Okay, and see who plays with this or who can change. Okay, he's saying because changes to this object can significantly impact access control or the availability of the systems. So let's see Again, what is the admin SD holder? I have also in the video recorded what is admin holder. Let's see what is the admin holder, and see also another description what is the admin holder. So let's see here another description what is the admin holder, and actually we can see it. I will show you all how we can get it from the Active Directory, how we can see it. So this is simply the same. This is another website describing the same thing, or saying the same thing about the admin SD holder. Okay, here we can see that the admin SD holder, it is under systems container in the built-in organizational unit in the Active Directory. So in the built-in organizational unit Active Directory, you can see systems, a container, and then another container called admin SD holder. So this is where we need to see if there is if we audit, if we have audit options, or if we have audit the access to these folders, because this is very critical. Okay, let's see another description of what is the admin SD holder. Here we can see that there is another description saying that the SD holder is a container in the Active Directory that maintains a master list of permissions for objects that are members of the privileged groups in the Active Directory. So he's having, or he have a master list of permissions for members of these groups: administrators, domain admins, enterprise admins, schema admins, domain controllers, server operators, etc. So all of the members in these groups, this container has a list of the permissions of the members in these groups. So for example, if I am a member in the domain admins, okay, I have some permissions. Okay, these permissions are stored as a template or a master list in the admin SD holder container. So he is saying some things. Okay, he's saying that, or he have an advice. Let's see first. This is first recommend. This thing he's saying that every hour, basically every hour, Windows will compare the security permissions of an account that is a member of the privileged groups described above to the permissions listed on the admin SD holder object. So he compares the current permissions of a member in one of these groups to the template in the admin SD holder. If there is any differences, it will be reset. Okay, so this is a very good thing if an hacker, for example, has played with the domain admin, the current domain admin permissions, and it is compared again to the admin SD holder master permissions, it will be reset. He will remove, or it will remove the permissions added or removed by the hacker to the domain admin member current permission. This become a problem if you do not maintain a separate user account for administrative functions. So he's saying, for example, if you are having a BlackBerry enterprise server, for example, and it should be operated with a domain admin account, okay, you should give him or give this domain admin member additional permissions to run the BlackBerry server or ActiveSync with Exchange. So this user will have domain admin rights and BlackBerry enterprise admin rights and ActiveSync admin rights. Okay, so this is very critical because the admin SD holder folder doesn't contain or doesn't give the domain admin members BlackBerry permissions or ActiveSync permissions. So this is not included in the template. So every time you add these two rights, okay, to the domain admin member, it will be reset. So he's saying, let's see what he's saying here. This become a problem if you do not maintain a separate user account for administrative functions and instead add your user account to the domain admins group. So this is especially in a situation, for example, he's saying that there is two scenarios. If you have a BlackBerry enterprise server and ActiveSync with Exchange, or you have an Exchange server. Let's see further what is the problem. Okay, he will give you a little bit of description here. Both of these accounts, or both these will need to add a particular permission to the security of your user account object. Okay, for example, BS admin or BlackBerry admin will need a send permission for your account. If you are a member of a privileged group, one of these, that permission will disappear within the next hour, causing your BlackBerry no longer to able to send messages. So for example, you have an account called Kareem, and this Kareem is a member of the domain admins, and he is the same time a BlackBerry enterprise admin or an exchange admin. Okay, the permissions for the exchange and the BlackBerry will be removed from him, okay, because the admin SD holder object doesn't have permissions for BlackBerry and Active Sync in its template for the domain admins or for the privileged groups. So here is saying that if you are a member of a privileged group, the permissions will disappear within the next hour, causing your BlackBerry no longer to be able to send messages. Likewise, you will not be able to use Active Sync or your Exchange server. So be very careful to have separate accounts, or this is the one we have been talking from the beginning of the lab, to have two separate accounts. One account to manage the Active Directory, okay, and the other one is to manage the daily operations. Sometimes, for example, to install software, to remove software, to operate applications. This should be done with a separate account. So the domain admin account should only be used to manage the Active Directory. Okay, so this is one of the things these recommendations stress on. Okay, so let's just turn back to our recommendation. Our recommendation say that we need to monitor carefully the admin SD holder object. We need to monitor it very careful and to audit it, and these audits should be added in the event log, and we need to revise this events regularly. So here he's telling us we need to see, or we need to revise the permissions on the admin SD holder Active Directory objects. We can see who can access this folder, and not only this, we need also to make sure that we can audit any changes or things done to this container. Successful audits or successful changes and failure changes. So let's see here where this folder resides. So we can go to the console, our console, and then see where is the admin SD holder folder or container resides. So here we can see, if we open the built-in container, okay, and then and then we will see something, I think not built in, it is in the system. Okay, so this is under the domain. You can see a container called system, and in system, okay, we can see that there is a folder called, we have a folder called admin SD holder. Let's see the properties of this folder, and we see the security. Okay, here we can see that there is some users that or groups have access to this folder. Everyone doesn't have, I think, read. Maybe authenticated users have read, and other groups. This is the default groups and users, okay, added to this folder. Okay, so we do not need to change it, we just need to revise it. If you open advanced, okay, we will see in the audit tab what we can audit. So we can go to the audit and see, we need to see what type of audit or what events we will audit. We will audit the failure and success. Okay, and let's see what we will audit. We will audit some features. Okay, so we need to see the audit setting for this container. We need to make sure that it is completely right. We need to revise it with the PDF. So we need to see what the PDF contains and see what is really on the admin SD holder audit tab. Okay, so we need to do this. The next recommendation is something called RID manager. Object must be configured with proper audit setting. We all know that in every Active Directory object have a unique name and a unique number, something called SID, okay, or security identifier. This is every object in the Active Directory is given a unique number. This is called SID. This SID is how the Active Directory recognize or verify objects in its environment. Sometimes the names, maybe it's not enough because maybe the names can be replicated, or they can be some objects have the same name, okay. Actually this will not happen, but we assume if there is objects with the same name, the second way to identify the object is the SID. Every object in the Active Directory have a unique SID. This object in the Active Directory could be a user, a group, or a computer, okay. So in the Active Directory there is a container called RID manager, okay. This container contains the SIDs that will be distributed to the objects in the Active Directory. So for example, if there is a user that needs an SID, it will get its SID from ID manager container, okay. Let's see also another description about what is the RID manager. And by the way, also this object we should monitor, or we should audit it carefully, because we need to know who will play with the SID pool. So the RID manager, it is a pool of SIDs that is distributed to Active Directory objects. So the RID manager is responsible for distributing SID objects to the Active Directory objects in the domain, or it is the manager of this SID. And by the way, every Active Directory object, I mean here a user or a group or a computer, its SID contains or it is consists of two parts. The domain has a special SID plus the SID of the object itself. So for example, if my user Karim in the Active Directory, I will get an SID. My SID consists of two parts. One, the SID of the domain, and this is fixed. It will be given to all of the Active Directory object, and an SID for me as a user. This will be changed, okay, or this will be different, okay. So every, for example, computer, user, or group will have the same domain SID, but they will differ in their own IDs. The user will have a different SID than the group that has a different SID, different than the SID of the computer, okay. So let's see also another description of what is the RID manager, or what is the meaning of this. What is the meaning of RID? RID is relative identifier, okay. This is let's see, this is the short list of what is, or this is something like a shortcut, okay. What is the RID? Let's see what is the RID. RID, it is let's have one description about it. Relative ID or relative identifier, okay. And who is responsible for distributing the SIDs to the Active Directory objects? It is the primary domain controller, okay. There is only one domain controller responsible for distributing SIDs to the Active Directory objects, which is normally, or it is most of the time, the primary domain controller. Here let's see a description. He's saying that the RID master, or relative ID master, is responsible for processing RD pool requests from all domain controllers in a particular domain. When a DC creates a security principal object such as a user or a group, so if there is a user or a group is created in the domain controller, it attaches a unique security ID to the object. The SID consists of a domain SID, so domain has a special SID, the same for all SIDs created in a domain, and a relative ID, which is the changeable, or this is the part that changes from one object to another. That is a unique for each security principal SID created in the domain. Each DC in a domain is allocated a pool of RIDs that is allowed to assign to the security principals it's created. when a DC allocated RD pool fails below a threshold, that DC issues a request for additional RIDs to the domain controller's RID master. The domain RID master responds to the request by retrieving RIDs from the domain's unallocated RD pool and assign them to the pool of the requesting DC. At any one time, there can be only one domain controller acting as the RID master in the domain. So this is a process, or this container, or this RID manager folder is responsible for distributing SIDs to different Active Directory objects. Okay, and there is only one domain controller responsible for doing this process. And if there is any additional domain controller that needs SIDs, it will ask it from the RID master, which is the primary domain controller. Okay, let's see also a little bit of a description here. What is the RID master? We have seen this already, so this is very simple. Okay, your SID or any Active Directory object contains of two parts. Okay, SID for the domain and relative ID for the object. Okay, so this is what we need to see. There is an object in the Active Directory called RID manager container. We need to see who can access this very important folder, and we need to audit the changes in this one. Okay, so here we can see that there is the object contains of the domain SID plus the relative ID of the object itself. Okay, so we need to see this folder where it resides. Okay, actually I try to see, or I try to go to the Active Directory and see where is the RD manager folder. I didn't find it actually. So here is saying that the RD manager object, we need to audit it. So we need to audit the changes to this RD manager object in the Active Directory and see who plays with it and who changes it, and who can access it. So let's see, we can do a little bit of a search here. RID, okay, manager, Active Directory object. So here let's see what is the image, or how we can see it from here. I think this is maybe something like this. Yes, here it is, but we need to get it from the ADSI console. Here we can see that it is in system, and in system there is something called RD manager pool. But let's see if we can get it from the Active Directory. Let's see here if we can get it from the Active Directory. Let's see here. Yep, let's go and open it and see it on a little bit of a larger scale. So here let's open this one. So here, yes, this is it. This is the, in the system container, Active Directory container, we have something called RD manager. This is the one, but it's not accessible from the Active Directory users at computers console. This is from the ADSI console, or the Active Directory schema, I think, schema editor or something like this. Anyway, so this is where the RID manager resides. We need to make sure that we right click properties and see here this object, if who can access it and how we can audit it, or we need to see what type of events we can audit for this object, or to make sure it is auditable. Okay, so this is one of the things also we need to make sure. So let's close this one and continue. So this is also one of the things, the very important things to know. Okay, but I think I need already done this, so let's see this. Okay, so here is saying that it will be under system. So here to view the audit options for this container, it will be available in Active Directory users and computers. I didn't find it there. And open advanced features from view, and under the system container you'll see something called Red Manager properties, and see the security tab and see the audit tab. But anyway, I didn't find this, so I didn't find this container, okay, in the Active Directory users and computers console. You can get it from AD I think SI edit console. Okay, so as we have seen in the picture, but I didn't find it here, so I didn't find what it's called here. I didn't find it. It's not under SID. Sorry, it is not under system container. I didn't find it here. We can see it. I didn't find it, and I have already the advanced features view already there. It's already there, so I didn't find it. Okay, so this container is responsible for distributing relative identities to the objects in the Active Directory. Okay, the relative identity, not the domain or the SID of the domain. Anyway, we didn't find it. And then the next recommendation is to configure audit account management, computer account management success. So here we need to monitor the creating of Active Directory computer objects in the domain, creating or changing or deleting or renaming or disabling or enabling computer Active Directory objects. So we need to do this. Okay, I have done this before already, but we need to know, or we need to audit who delete Active Directory computer objects, who renames Active Directory computer objects, who disables or enable Active Directory computer objects or accounts. This is already recorded in the event viewer, but by enabling the audit option, we have more details in the event log. So let's see also how we can do this. So we can go to the group policy in the advanced audit policy and enable this option to audit computer accounts or account management. So we can go and see this in our server hardening group policy. We will edit it. Okay, and see the audit. So go to administrative templates. I think no Windows setting maybe, and then security, and then we go to the audit, down the audit policy, and then account management, audit policies, and then account management, and then enable audit computer account management. Okay, so we go to the system, and then not system, I think it's in account management, so we need to go up, audit computer account management. So here I think this is also not related to auditing Active Directory users, Active Directory computer accounts, but also the local computer account. I think maybe no, there is no local computer account, there is only computer Active Directory accounts. So we will audit the success, okay, of these things. Okay, so we will audit computer account management, and then we need to do another thing. We need to audit directory service access records. Okay, what are these? These are related to users accessing an Active Directory object. So we need to know what users access, for example, objects in the Active Directory. So if you have shared, for example, something in the Active Directory, and our object is shared in the Active Directory, and one of the users need to access this shared folder in the Active Directory, this will be recorded. So it's saying audit directory service records events related to users accessing an Active Directory objects. Let's see, I will show you all more details about this kind of record. Okay, I have another thing, but let me see first where it resides. So let's go and see it is in what section. It is DS access. So let's go to our website and see what is the description of this thing. Windows or security. Let's see here, security, Windows, or I think security, no, security, Windows security, oh, ultimate, yes, sorry, it's ultimate, sorry, yes, here it is. So let's see here what is the directory service access. He is saying that for example, the one that we are talking about, directory service access, similar to object access. Let's see what is the directory service access. Directory service access, here is saying that we typically recommend disabling directory service access and instead use the Active Directory or the directory service change subcategory to track actual changes. The directory service access logs these events on a DC. You might recall that the object access category, SAM subcategory, anyway, here is saying that we need to audit Active Directory access. Here is say a handle to an object was requested, an operation was performed on an object. So here we see he will record access to objects in the Active Directory by a user. Okay, so he's saying that, let's see for example this operation. So he's saying Active Directory logs this event when a user accesses an AD object. Of course, the object audit policy must be enabled for permissions requested and the user requesting it or a group to which a user belongs. Okay, so you need to audit or validate the audit on the object itself. Okay, for tracking property chain service. On the other hand, anyway, so here for example the details, the SID of the account, so the user's SID, the account name, the domain, and the login ID, I think. Then these are general information about the user. It's SID, the account name, the domain, the login ID, and then the object itself. It have some info about it. Object server, always the DS. Object type, the object class defined in the schema, a user or a group container or organizational unit. Object name, the distinguished name of the object accessed, and the handle. So here he will give you two things: the subject, who is the user that is trying to access an Active Directory object, his SID, his name, and so on, and the object he is trying to access, if it is a group or a user or a group policy container or an organizational unit. Okay, so all of these are additional information. Operation, object access, what is the type of access, right, property, or AD permissions used, access whatsoever. Anyway, GUI, the properties upon which permissions was exercised. Anyway, so these are detailed information about a user accessing a certain object in the Active Directory. Okay, so we need to audit this kind of things, the access of certain users to certain Active Directory objects. So this is also, we need to open it in our group policy. Okay, so these are group policies. It will be used basically in a domain. Okay, I think this also will be applied to the domain controller. Okay, so let's go first. This is we have two things, the success and failure. So we need to audit directory service access success and failure. We have two things, success and failure, and then we need to continue on the other recommendations. We have the directory. We have this first is directory service access failure and directory service. This is directory service changes, not directory service access. Okay, directory service access, this is access by users in the Active Directory to objects in the Active Directory. This object could be another user or a group or a container or a group policy object. Here is saying that directory service change records events related to changes made to objects in the Active Directory domain services. So if there is any change to objects made in the Active Directory, changes to a user object, to a computer object, to a group object, this also will be recorded or need to be audited. Okay, so let's see again what the description of it. Ultimate Windows security. So let's go to the directory service here, and let's see the description about it. Most useful to track changes, is saying here, most useful to track changes. Let's see here description of changes here. The directory service changes generates events only on DCs. Okay, this is useful for tracking changes to AD objects that have object level auditing enabled. So we need to enable audit on objects in the Active Directory, okay, to have this group policy in effect. So we need to first enable audit on a certain objects. Maybe this object is a user or a group or a folder or anyway. So you need to enable audit, okay, on or audit level on the object. So for example, here is the kind of events that are recorded. A directory service object was modified. Let's see this here. Okay, of course, the identification of the AD object under the user. The event documents modification to AD objects, identifying the object changed, the user, the attribute modified. So this is very, very, very useful. Okay, so saying what is the object changed, who is the user that changed it, and what is the attribute he changed in the object. So this is a very good thing to know. This is the details of the user. Okay, the directory service, the name of the domain, okay, or whatsoever, the object he's trying to change, distinguished name of the object, the attribute, what he's changing it, the name of the attribute defined in the schema, on the Active Directory schema. Okay, so here we can see what is the value, value added or value deleted. So he have a lot of things we can see. The user changed the object, the name of the object, the attribute changed in the object, this attribute changed, added or deleted. So this is very, very good and useful thing to know. A directory service object was created. This is modification. This is about a creation. Okay, so anything or any Active Directory object changes, deleted or created or moved or deleted, all of these are recorded. Active Directory objects. So this is also one of the good things to record. So we have directory service access to Active Directory objects is recorded, and changes to Active Directory objects are recorded as well. So let's continue. We need here to have the success of directory service changes. So this is also should be done. Directory service changes, we need to do it as success, and I think you will ask about the failure as well. So let's continue and see. Yes, we need failure also. So every process have two outcomes, success or failure. So we need to audit two, success and failure. So this is, I think these group policies are done to the domain controller. Here we have another recommendation, something called domain controllers must have a PKI server certification. Okay, a certification, it's a way to verify that the user have permissions or have or he is trusted to access the domain. So for example, my domain controller give a certificate to the user, okay, and the next time the user logs into the domain, he shows this certificate to the domain controller to verify that he has access to the domain. So domain controllers are part of a chain of trust for PKI authenticators. Without the appropriate certification, the authenticity of the domain controller cannot be verified. Domain controller must have a server certificate to establish authenticity as part of the PKI authentication in the domain. So a certification is a way to authenticate the user to the domain. We all know that we can authenticate a user to the domain using the Kerberos protocol, but to authenticate a user to the domain, it's much better to authenticate it to the domain using a certificate, and this certificate should be distributed to all of the computer objects in the domain. So let's have another description. What is the PKI? What is PKI? PKI certificate, Active Directory. Okay, let's see here. Okay, here is we can see that you say it is used to establish an on-premise public key infrastructure. It has the ability to create, validate, and revoke public keys. No, not it is. What is PKI in Active Directory? Provides an infrastructure functionality, depends on, let's see here, what is PKI in Active Directory? Okay, PKI provides the public key functionality that underpins identities and other security functionality on the Windows domain. File encryption, email encryption, network traffic encryption. So it is basically a certification used to verify users or authenticate users to the domain and help us to encrypt emails and files and encrypt network traffic. So this certification is used as an identity or verification of identity and as a way to encrypt files and folders. Okay, according to Microsoft server role that allows you to build a public infrastructure and provide public key cryptic digital certifications and digital certification capabilities for your organization. So this certification is used for authentication and for encryption of files, emails, network traffic. So this is what a PKI simply does. We need to make sure that we have a PKI certificate server in our domain. Okay, and this will be used to verify users and to help us encrypt files and emails and network traffic. So what this is basically what does, or what he says here, we need to we need to have let's see here, we need to have a PKI certificate server. Okay, so we need to have this. I think we have done this already. We can pass it real quickly. So we have done this. So we need to have a PKI certificate server. The domain controller must have a PKI server certification. So this is one of the things we need to have. The domain controller must have a PKI server certificate. So I think he's saying here that the domain controller should be a PKI certificate server. Okay, so here we can know if we have a PKI certificate server or not on the domain controller by opening opening a console for the certificates and see if we have the PKI installed or not. So we can check our domain controller to see if it has a PKI certificate server installed or not. Obtain a server certificate for the domain controller. If no certificate for the domain controller exists in the right pane, this is the fine. And I think not the domain controller itself, you can make a separate server and make it a PKI server and let the domain controller take a certificate from it. Okay, so I think this is one of the things also. So this is a very good thing to use a PKI in our infrastructure. Domain controllers are a part of a chain of trust for PKI authentication. Without appropriate, so we need to have our domain controller to have a PKI certificate and all of our groups, or sorry, all of our computers must have a certificate. So all of our server objects and computer objects in our domain should have a certificate or PKI certificate to verify and authenticate and encrypt data and emails and so on. Okay, so this is it. So let's continue working a PKI, and this is how we can install a PKI. You can do it from Microsoft, so we can continue. Okay, to configure the PKI, this is how we can do it, how we can install a PKI server. So a domain controller certificate must be issued, a PKI certificate. So the domain controller will take a PKI certificate, must be issued by a DoD PKI or approved external or certificate server. So here he is very clear about that. We will have a server completely separate, or we have a PKI certificate server, and it will give a certificate to the domain controller. This certificate from PKI server should be issued by the DoD or an external certificate authority. Anyway, so we need to install a PKI certificate server, and from it we will issue certificates and give it to the domain controller and computers. Okay, so this is very good things, okay, to have a PKI certificate server installed. So we don't have this in the domain, but we need to make sure we have it already. So he is saying that, or he's clarifying and saying this, and he's saying that the PKI, I think, certificates will be issued not only to computers or server objects and computer objects, but also to user accounts. Okay, so he is saying here PKI certifications will be issued to computers and servers and user accounts. Okay, so he's saying certificate associated with user account must be issued by DoD. Okay, so we can issue certificates to computers and issue certificates to users. Okay, for example, if you need a certain user, if for example you have a Sophos or a firewall and you need this user to access the firewall, you need to give him a certificate. Okay, certificate to access the firewall, and this certificate, it could be issued from the Sophos firewall itself, or I think from the PKI certificate. Anyway, so this is one of the things, to have a PKI server in place, okay, or certificate server in place. Okay, so let's continue. So he's saying here we can access, or we can issue a command to see who gets certifications from the PKI. Anyway, so we don't have PKI in place, so we cannot be able to see this kind of, or we cannot able to issue this command and see a result, because I don't have PKI certifications in place. Here we can see that he's saying that Active Directory user accounts, including administrator, must be configured to require the use of a common access card, personal identity verification, compliant hardware token, or alternative login token for user authentication. So this is something like smart cards. We need not only the administrators or privileged users like the administrators to access the domain only, or to verify or authenticate themselves to the domain only by their username and password, but to use smart cards in a way called a two-factor authentication technique. So the username and password is not the only way to authenticate yourself to the domain. There is a second step, like a card or a code. For example, if you need to access your email through Google, for example, he will send you a code on your mobile. You need to provide your username and password, and this code sent to you through the mobile by the Google server, and after matching, so after your username and password is correct and the code sent by Google to your mobile, you provided it to the website correctly, it will let you access your email. So you do not access your email by your username and password, but also by a PIN code sent to your mobile through the Google server, and you provide it to the Google website or the Google email website, so he let you access your email. So this is a way, okay, something called two-factor authentication. We have something like this in our domain called smart cards. So we use our username and passwords and the smart cards as two-factor authentication technique. So this is very good thing to know. Also, we do not depend upon one type of or one factor for authentication. We need to have two factors of authentication. Okay, so we need to see this. If you need to know if you have a smart card login authentication, you can issue command through the PowerShell and see if you have this kind of authentication in place. Okay, anyway, so we all know this. Okay, and the other recommendation, something called domain controller must require LDAP access signing. Okay, so we know LDAP, it is a protocol used to query the Active Directory. Maybe you can query the Active Directory for data concerning some users, reports. You need to get reports from the Active Directory, so you use the LDAP as the way to connect to the Active Directory to get data. So the LDAP, okay, should be signed. What we mean by signed? Signed here, he is saying here unsigned network traffic. So the LDAP should be signed, because we do not need a hacker to manipulate the data. So for example, if I am a user and I am using the LDAP to connect to the Active Directory to get some data, okay, the connection between me as a user and the Active Directory through the LDAP, it should be signed. Okay, so signed, we mean that the Active Directory knows that I am the user asking for the data, and I am authorized to do this, and I am not another one, so no one will impersonate my account and ask the data from the Active Directory. He's saying unassigned network traffic is susceptible to man-in-the-middle attacks when an intruder captures packets between the server and the client and modifies them before forwarding them to the client. In case of an LDAP server, this means that an attacker could cause a client to make decisions based on false records from the LDAP directory. So for example, he can manipulate the data that you get from the Active Directory using the LDAP and let you take wrong decisions based on this false records. The risk of an attacker pulling this off can be decreased by implementing strong physical security measures to protect the network infrastructure. Furthermore, implementing Internet Protocol or security IP-thick authentication headers, which performs mutual authentication and packet integrity for Internet Protocol, can make all type of the middle attack extremely difficult. Okay, so this is, we know about the LDAP. Okay, so let's see also, we can have a little bit of something. What is LDAP? Okay, what is LDAP? Let's see here. So LDAP, it is a protocol that makes it possible for applications to query user information rapidly. This is one of the things that we are talking about. So what is LDAP? Protocol used to possible for applications to query user information rapidly. Someone within your office wants to do things. Send an email to a recent hire and print a copy of the conversation on a new printer. LDAP makes both of these steps possible. Set it up properly, and that employee does not need to talk with IT to complete the task. What is LDAP? Companies store users' passwords, emails, printer connections, and other static information within directories. LDAP is an open vendor neutral application protocol for accessing and maintaining that data. LDAP can also tackle authentication, so users can sign on just once and access many different files on the server. So this is basically what is LDAP. LDAP is a protocol. It does not specify how directory programs work. Instead, it is a form of language that allows users to find information they need very quickly. Okay, so this is the thing. This is a way to query data or to get data, and this is used in the Active Directory as well to retrieve data and to do a lot of things. So he is saying that to use this type of protocol, you need to sign the data sent between the client and the server. Sign it to prevent hacking in the middle. Okay, so this is one of the things also we need to take care. So we need to make sure that LDAP access signing, it is require signing, or it is signed to prevent manipulating of the data. Okay, so this is one of the things we need to go and check if we have our LDAP protocol is signed or requires signing. Okay, domain controller LDAP server signing requirement. Okay, so let's go and see this local, and then I think in the security options we need to go and verify that the domain controller LDAP, yes, LDAP signing requirement, not client, I think it's signing client, no, server. So we have two parts, the server and the client. So the client asking for the data should sign his data sent, and the LDAP server. So we need to have two. Here we need to make it as not none, I think we'll make it require signing. Okay, so we do require signing. Okay, require signing, applying the OK. It's saying that this could do some problems, so you need to test this setting before applying it. Okay, so this is one of the things I need to see if this is done in my default domain policy. I need to make sure, so if I have it activated in my default domain policy, this will be applied to all of the servers and workstations. So let's go to the Windows setting and then security, and then we go to the local policies and then servers. Let's see if we have LDAP. No, it's not defined, so I don't have it enabled in my domain. I think maybe for compatibility issues, or I'm afraid it will do some changes. Here we will discuss this last recommendation and we stop at this recommendation. Domain controller must be configured to allow reset of machine account passwords. We all know that every user have a password, okay, and his password can be changed, an Active Directory user, but also the computer has a password and it can be changed. Okay, enabling this setting on all domain controllers in a domain prevents domain members from changing their computer password accounts. If these passwords are weak or compromised, the inability to change them may leave these computers vulnerable. So domain controllers can or should be able to change the computer account passwords. So a user can reset his password, okay, and the computer can reset his password, and the computer password is used to authenticate the computer to the domain controller. So there is two type of authentication. The user is authenticated to the domain controller, and the computer also is authenticated to the domain controller. The user has a password and the computer has a password. Okay, so here with this group policy, we will let the domain controller reset the machine password or the computer account password if it is expired or it is needed to be changed. Okay, so let's see how we can do this from the group policy. As we see here, it applies also to the domain controller. So let's see how we can change this setting. So we'll go to domain controllers, refuse machine password changes, it will be disabled. Okay, so we need to let the domain controller change the computer account password. Okay, so let's go and see how we can do this. So we go to the domain controller again, so we go to security and the domain controller and change, let's go there, how we see it. We also go to the policies. I see my default domain policy, and then we'll go to the security setting, and then local policies, and then security options, and let domain controller or refuse change domain controller password. It is disabled, but here I am not enabling it in my default domain policy. We will stop at the minute 21:22, and we will continue working in the upcoming video. Hope this video informative for you all, and thank you all for viewing. Thank you so much.